What's up, guys? We are live. We are live. I've got the graphic going on too. I'm experimenting with some overlays here. So everybody get in, and we'll go over some documents for the Jay-Z accuser story. There's some new stuff that's been filed too. If you guys follow me on Twitter/X, the website formerly known as Twitter, you will see the latest. Gosh, what a mess this case is. From the very beginning, it was just a mess. Let me turn off the TV here and welcome everybody. Hit that like button. Let me know what's going on. It's been a while since I did a live. I had to kind of take it easy for a while there, but we had a busy time, and I think things are going to get busier with this lawsuit. I was in court last week for the first hearing in Jay-Z's extortion and defamation lawsuit against Buzbee. That's actually filed here in Los Angeles. But this new lawsuit that was filed today is different than that case. This is a new federal case filed in Alabama, and we've got some new allegations in there, some new claims from Jay-Z's lawyers against the woman, saying that they are in contact with this woman. They've talked to her, and she has said that Buzbee is the one who pressured her to bring this claim here. So we'll bring it up here in a second. Here, I'm doing some more with PDFs and everything here on this channel here. So come on in, everybody. Say hi. Hit the like button. There's two lawsuits. The lawsuit against Jay-Z was dismissed back in February 14th, I believe it was dismissed. So that was dismissed with prejudice. And there was always a question of we never heard from Buzbee about it. We heard from Jay-Z, but we never heard from Buzbee. And the dismissal was with prejudice, which means it can't be refiled, which I think everybody saw as, a win for Jay-Z. But in a new declaration filed today, Jay-Z, or the accuser, is saying she stands by the claims. So let's see here. Let's see if we can get into the digs here. This might have been how you found it. This is where I reported it initially. This is the new lawsuit against Buzbee, Jane Doe, and then Buzbee's co-counsel, David Fortney. It was brought in Alabama. So stay on topic here, guys. Let's stay on topic. But give me a like if you can. Give me a like if you can. I will say the new declaration, I just tweeted this a few minutes ago before I got on, but Buzbee, and this was not filed in the federal lawsuit, this was filed in the Los Angeles case. He's saying he has a declaration from Jane Doe that says, although I ultimately chose not to pursue them, I stand by my claims in the New York action and believe that I had a meritorious claim against Jay-Z. So according to Jay-Z's new lawsuit, they don't have a lot of exact quotes from her in there, but there's a lot of confidence behind the complaint and how they say that the woman has come forward and said that the claims are not true. We'll get the exact wording up here. Everybody, let me know how you're doing. See where you're from. We got a small crowd tonight. We got to juice the algorithm here. Let everybody know where you're from. Here is the lawsuit. And this is Jay-Z versus Tony Buzbee, the second round and then also Jane Doe. And he does not identify Jane Doe, but Jane Doe is the woman who sued both Jay-Z and Diddy and alleged that she was raped by them at an after party for the Video Music Awards in 2000. And remember, that lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice February 14th, which means it can't be refiled. And we'd heard from Jay-Z. He issued statements after the dismissal criticizing Tony Buzbee. We never heard from Tony Buzbee, but there was a pretty big sign that there hadn't been any kind of settlement when the Los Angeles case was proceeding. Jay-Z has extortion claims and defamation claims against Buzbee in Los Angeles County that are still going forward. But this new case brings actually 4 claims against Buzbee, and only actually 3 claims against Buzbee, 4 against Jane Doe, including defamation. There's a new defamation claim against Jane Doe in this federal lawsuit. There's also a conspiracy case, a conspiracy claim, and malicious prosecution is the big one. And in the Los Angeles case, that's what the judge was saying. The judge is leaning towards throwing out the extortion claim against Tony Buzbee in the Los Angeles case, and is saying that legally, as long as Buzbee had an intent to sue or a plan to sue, it can't be extortion if even if the claims he's bringing forth turn out to be false and he really did no investigation. As long as he has some kind of plan to sue and someone to represent, I guess the legislature is pretty clear that those demand letters aren't extortion. So the judge was saying, this is last week in Los Angeles, the hearing that I went to, he was saying what this could be is it could be the beginnings of a malicious prosecution claim. And so that's what we've got here. That's what was filed today in Alabama federal court, and we've got the first page of it up on screen today. But he said it starts false, malicious, strategically and tactically calculated in time to inflict maximum pain and suffering on Mr. Carter, and in conspiracy with multiple attorneys, including defendants Anthony Buzbee and David Fortney, who, like her, were soullessly motivated by greed, an abject disregard of the truth, and the most fundamental precepts of human decency. These are the only truthful and fair descriptions of Jane Doe's and her lawyers' malevolent efforts to assassinate the impeccable and life-earned character of Shawn Corey Carter, who is professionally known as Jay-Z, but more importantly is known as dad and husband and son, and a human being who did nothing to deserve or elicit the wanton, depraved attack that Jane Doe, in conspiracy with her lawyers, launched to extort Mr. Carter beginning on November 5th, 2024, through a menacing private demand letter. And this is, again, the complaint that was filed today in federal court. There's 4 claims, including a defamation claim against Jane Doe. There's already a defamation claim against Buzbee in Los Angeles that, like I said, it sounds like the judge is going to throw out the extortion claim against Buzbee, but the defamation claim will proceed on 3 statements. There's 3 statements the judge says he's going to dismiss, but 3 statements that will proceed. So technically there could be a trial, although I'm not sure. It seems like it's a little too weak for something that you'd actually see on trial. I mean, I don't want to speak for Jay-Z's lawyers, but it seems like this new lawsuit that they filed is going to kind of take the attention of that, because this is the malicious prosecution case or something. But kind of take more precedent over the Los Angeles case. But I think they're both. We're going to see a lot of action on both, because the declaration that Buzbee filed today from Jane Doe is in the Los Angeles case, but we can get through the federal lawsuit filed today in Alabama. It says that Doe and her lawyers, that's Tony Buzbee, David Fortney, and then the Buzbee law firm, brought before the world an in-court complaint, the impossibility and indeed absurdity of which was surpassed only by its vile malevolence, in a desperate attempt to leverage Mr. Carter into an extortionate payoff, which these malicious actors presented as the only path for Mr. Carter to prevent the public prosecution of a lawsuit by Doe. When their initial extortionate demand letter failed to yield the financial windfall they sought, and after Doe told Buzbee, with whom she had never spoken before the demand letter was drafted and sent, that Mr. Carter, quote, did not sexually assault her, Buzbee, quote, pushed her. And I'm assuming when they have the her in brackets, it's because the actual quote from her is me. But that's kind of just an assumption on my part. But I think that's how that works. But it said Buzbee pushed her towards going forward with the false story against Mr. Carter to make the case better and get them, the lawyers, and her more money. Specifically, Buzbee brought Jay-Z into it. Buzbee then went forward with naming Mr. Carter with full knowledge by him, as imparted to him by Miss Doe, that Mr. Carter had never assaulted Doe. And Doe's entire story as it relates to Mr. Carter was completely fabricated. So this right here seems like kind of the bombshell quote. I mean, there's no like transcript of an interview or something attached to this lawsuit, but I mean, the complaint's written with a lot of confidence. This is the new complaint that was filed today against Tony Buzbee. But if she actually said that, like if they have an interview with her, like in Jay-Z's lawyers, investigators, or whatever, talked to her, and she actually said that Buzbee brought Jay-Z into it, that seems pretty substantial. I mean, it's like, what in the idea, are they really going to quote that in there without, and just say that she said that when she didn't actually say that? I don't know. Buzbee released a statement after this came out saying that he's talked to Jane Doe, and after talking to her, he says the statements in this lawsuit are either made up. He said they're either completely made up or they come from someone who's not actually her. So he's kind of alleging that perhaps, they're either lying or they're mistaken, and they talked to somebody who they thought was the plaintiff but isn't actually the plaintiff. And then he filed the declaration from her in the other case that says she stands by her claims. So I'm like, okay, I definitely don't think we've seen the last of it. It seems like it's Jay-Z's team is going to come forward, perhaps in response to the declaration filed in Los Angeles County, and back up their claims more about what she actually said. Buzbee then went forward with naming Mr. Carter with full knowledge by him, as imparted to him by Doe, that Mr. Carter had never assaulted Doe, and Doe's entire story as it related to Mr. Carter was completely fabricated. It says Doe has now voluntarily admitted directly to representatives of Mr. Carter that the story brought before the world in court and on global television was just that, a false, malicious story. She has admitted that Mr. Carter did not assault her, and that indeed it was Mr. Buzbee himself whom she met for the first time at a coffee shop in Houston on the day of her maliciously false NBC News interview, which is discussed in detail below, who pushed her to go forward with the false narrative of the assault by Mr. Carter in order to leverage a maximum payday. To compound this egregious harm, just last Friday, Buzbee's and Fortney's co-counsel, a prominent New York attorney in the now dismissed false action against Mr. Carter, threatened Mr. Carter's counsel to double down with yet another false public statement by Doe if Mr. Carter publicly revealed her admissions and Buzbee's and Fortney's misdeeds in Mr. Carter's pending California lawsuit against Buzbee. So I think that kind of previews the declaration that we just saw filed today in the LA case from Jane Doe, saying that she stands by her claims, which we'll bring that up here. But fortunately, and clearly unexpectedly from their perspective, Doe, Buzbee, and Fortney were met with nothing but righteous resolve at every turn by Mr. Carter. He stood steadfast, publicly decried the lies being put forth against him, and beat the evil conspiracy among malicious Doe and her malevolent, soulless lawyers, driving them back. I mean, this reads like something out of a comic book, almost like superhero type stuff, driving them back into the shadows from which they came, resulting in the voluntary dismissal with prejudice, without settlement, of their false and malicious complaint on February 14th, 2025. Mr. Carter does not commence this action lightly. Following Jane Doe's admissions that she fabricated her claims against Mr. Carter, her lawyers have continued to seek to hide this reality, including through further extortionate threats and demands by Buzbee, Fortney, and their New York counsel on February 28th. Even after all of this, Mr. Carter does not expose his malicious and wrongful accuser's identity in this complaint, seeking to maintain her anonymity as Doe. But the extortion and abuse by Mr. Carter by Doe and her lawyers must stop. Therefore, Mr. Carter brings this lawsuit to hold Doe accountable for her willful defamation per se and her malicious prosecution of knowingly false allegations against Mr. Carter that Doe and her co-conspirator attorneys have falsely and maliciously peddled. So the parties to the lawsuit are: plaintiff is Shawn Corey Carter. Jay-Z is a citizen of the state of California, residing in the state of California. Anthony Buzbee, resident of Texas. He's got the Buzbee law firm. And David Fortney is an attorney, also affiliated with the Buzbee law firm in Texas. Defendant Buzbee law firm, located in Harris County, Texas. Jane Doe is a citizen of the state of Alabama, and she sued Carter in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York under a Jane Doe pseudonym. She later recounted and further published her malicious lies on NBC News without revealing her name. Jurisdiction, 75,000, because it's, you can file it in federal court because it involves damages of over 75,000 and mixed jurisdiction. Everyone lives in a different jurisdiction. So they had choice. There's got to be some legal strategic reason they filed it in Alabama, but they can because she's a resident there. But they also, I think, could have filed it in Texas or California pretty easily. But they went with Alabama, and because she resides there, and Buzbee and Fortney provided legal services to her and met with her there. Says Doe appears to be suffering from personal and financial hardship. She lost custody of her children, and her parents, who, on information and belief, support Doe, recently filed for bankruptcy protection. Desperate to obtain a payday, Doe hired the Buzbee law firm, which has a long history of whipping up a media frenzy with vague and sensational claims against public figures. I think that's just objectively true, to extort payments from Mr. Carter under their threat of devastating harm to his reputation. Sorry, I wanted to turn the page there for you guys. But again, this is the new lawsuit filed in Alabama federal court today against Tony Buzbee. Jay-Z suing Tony Buzbee, and Jane Doe, who is the woman who sued him for rape, alleged that he and Diddy raped her after the Video Music Awards in September 2000. That lawsuit has been dismissed, the original rape lawsuit. But now there's a lawsuit actually against her for defamation and malicious prosecution that Jay-Z filed today that also names her lawyers. So that's what we're going through here today. We've got the PDF up on the screen here, but says, as discussed below, Doe first attempted to extort Mr. Carter through an extortionate demand letter in an anonymous lawsuit, both from Buzbee. When Carter refused to capitulate to Doe's baseless demands, Doe doubled down by using the justice system to attempt to ruin Mr. Carter by formally naming Mr. Carter in a complaint making horrific false allegations. And when that also failed, Doe resorted to defaming Mr. Carter on global television. That's the NBC interview that so many of us saw. But says a simple Google search or other public record search of Doe by Buzbee and Fortney would have cast doubt on her credibility by revealing, among other things, A, less than 90 days before sending the demand letter, she had been caught on mental health related issues and charged with assault in the second degree. B, she has several mental health disorders and takes multiple medications according to testimony from her psychiatrist laid bare in public court records. And C, she made 3 other sexual assault allegations, which were either dropped or dismissed by courts. This is my note here, in journalism, this is what we call burying the lead. C should definitely be A. Because, I mean, I understand what they're saying here, but when you just start with her mental health disorder, it gets a little like, I mean, you could have a mental disorder and still be attacked, you know? But that's why I think it's important to stress, first of all, that she's made 3 other sexual assault allegations, which were either dropped or dismissed by courts, and then get into the mental health disorders. But that's just maybe a semantics thing. But I would say C is the most important part of all that there, but the others are of course relevant too. But on October 20th, 2024, Doe sued Shawn Diddy Combs and his business entities, as well as Doe's 1 through 10, and they attached the original complaint. That was, remember, it did get some attention at the time, but it was also one of many lawsuits that were being filed against Diddy, and it just named Diddy. It didn't name Jay-Z, so it didn't get quite the attention that it did later on when it was amended to add Jay-Z. But it says, although Doe's lawsuit also implicates unnamed celebrity A and unnamed celebrity B, Doe did not formally name them as parties. Instead, Doe only sued Doe's 1 through 10 as defendants. In her original complaint, Doe alleges that when she was 13 years old, a friend dropped her off at Radio City Music Hall in New York City so she could try to attend the MTV Video Music Awards on September 7th, 2000. Although she was unable to talk her way into the VMAs, a limousine driver purported to work for Combs and invited her to an after party. Later that evening, the limousine driver took her to a large white house with a gate U-shaped driveway about 20 minutes away. After accepting a drink, Doe claims that she felt woozy and lightheaded and found that what she believed to be an empty room. Doe alleges that Combs and Celebrity A sexually assaulted her while Celebrity B watched. And it has become evident that Doe did not initiate this legal action with a legitimate purpose. Instead, the lawsuit was filed with intent to extort Mr. Carter. A few weeks after filing her complaint, Doe, through Buzbee, sent Mr. Carter an extortionate letter dated November 5th, containing false allegations of vile conduct by Mr. Carter. Some of the allegations in Doe's letter were from the public complaint Doe filed against Combs in Doe's 1 through 10, which contained inconsistencies that were later changed when the complaint was amended, with the obvious implication being that she would amend her complaint to add Mr. Carter if he refused to pay. Doe threatened to take a different course if Mr. Carter did not commit to a confidential mediation to resolve this delicate and important matter by the deadline of November 19th, 2024, giving Mr. Carter only a 2-week window before she would go public with her false allegations. To avoid both public and criminal exposure, Buzbee stated that his client wants something of substance by way of a settlement. So there were no actual dollar amounts put forth in the demand letters, but however, Doe had already sued Mr. Carter, albeit as one of the Doe's 1 through 10. Doe's plan was thus clear. She was demanding that Mr. Carter either A, pay something of substance to stop her from making public the wildly false allegations of sexual assault that would subject Mr. Carter to irreparable harm and irreparably harm his reputation, family, career, and livelihood, or endure the financial and personal ruin. Doe's statements and correspondence made clear the immediate and extensive threat of exposure if Mr. Carter failed to pay. Doe amends her lawsuit to falsely allege that Mr. Carter sexually assaulted her. So this is on November 18th, 2024. Unwilling to capitulate to Doe and Buzbee's extortion, Mr. Carter filed a lawsuit against Buzbee for extortion and intentional infliction of emotional distress. This is the case in Los Angeles. Mr. Carter explained that Buzbee was shamelessly attempting to extort exorbitant sums from him or else publicly file wildly horrific allegations against him. On December 8th, 2024, humiliated by Mr. Carter's lawsuit, Mr. Buzbee encouraged Doe to file, and Buzbee and Fortney filed a first amended complaint revealing what Mr. Carter knew all along, that one of the Does was a placeholder for Mr. Carter if he did not pay her ransom. In Doe's first amended complaint, Doe makes wild, horrific, but utterly false allegations against Mr. Carter, substituting him for Celebrity A from the earlier complaint. Doe goes on global television falsely accusing Mr. Carter of sexual assault. It says, on December 13th, 2024, NBC News broadcasted portions of an exclusive interview of Doe, which was conducted by Fortney by her side. NBC News honored Doe's request to mask her identity. NBC News published a story exerting interviews it held with Doe. That's the one we all remember. During the interview, which was set up by Buzbee, was given on a voluntary basis in the presence of Fortney, Doe lied about Mr. Carter to a global television audience. In addition to attempting to explain the impossible, how she, as a 13-year-old from upstate New York, wound up in Manhattan at a private VMAs after-party with countless celebrities, Doe told NBC News how she spoke with musicians Benji Madden and his brother at the after-party. She recalled talking to Benji Madden about his tattoo of the Last Supper because she has a religious background, so it was something to talk about. It's a pretty specific detail. Doe repeated her claims that while at the after party, she had a drink. Excuse me. She had a drink that made her feel woozy, after which Combs and Mr. Carter took turns raping her, while an unidentified female celebrity watched. Doe told NBC that following the alleged sexual assault, she found her way to a gas station where she called her father who picked her up and drove her home. She states her father did not ask her what happened, what she did, or where she was. Instead, they rode home in silence for 5 hours and 47 minutes. Doe's allegations about Mr. Carter are false and defamatory, and her mendacy is clear, according to reporters at NBC News. First, although Doe stated that the assault occurred at a residence, Mr. Carter was at no such residence. Indeed, NBC News located photos of Mr. Carter from that evening showing him at a party at a commercial location, the now closed Lotus Club in New York City. Of course, a private nightclub cannot be mistaken for a, quote, large white residence with a gate-shaped U-shaped driveway that included a large living room for a foyer, a hallway containing several rooms off of it, and a bedroom. Even Buzbee admitted to NBC that Jane Doe does not admit the assault occurred at Lotus nightclub. Second, Doe told NBC she spent 20 minutes in the limo before arriving at the residence. However, when pressed about these details in a follow-up interview with NBC, Doe admitted that she did not know where she was going or even how long the drive took. Where she conceded to NBC that she guessed about the length of time of the trip had taken to the lawsuit. So this stuff is all stuff we've heard about in previous cases here. But it's their comments about how they've recently spoken to Jane Doe that are new. But again, we don't have a whole lot of details about that in there. But this is kind of repetitive of stuff we've already gone over. Just all the all the discrepancies and inconsistencies in the NBC News interview, which they'd raised in like dismissal motions for sanctions before. So, and they're talking about how she would just double down in when confronted with inconsistencies. where we're at here. Sandy asked if I think Jay-Z will be successful. It's hard to say. I mean, I think right now there's so much to be seen about, do they have like, did they record their interview with her? What's she going to say if she's, put under oath in court or something? I don't know. It's just, there's so much that remains to be seen. But like I said, this complaint is written with so much confidence. Like, they didn't include, there isn't like a video file or something that shows Jay-Z's people interviewing her, but you kind of wonder if that exists somewhere, because they've got, I mean, just the way they talk so matter-of-factly about what she told them, you'd think they would have some kind of, like, you doubt that they just have handwritten notes. Like, they probably recorded it somehow or something, but I don't know. It doesn't say anything about that in here. So, but I think we're definitely going to be hearing about that more. So, and I think this is like the bombshell stuff, like the new stuff right here. Because like I said, all that NBC News interview stuff is interesting and good, but we've kind of heard that all before in other filings. This is the new stuff that says, she has now admitted that Mr. Carter did not assault her. Indeed, Buzbee, aware that Mr. Carter did not assault her, pushed her to make the false claim for money. Having already sent the false and defamatory demand letters, having filed the false and defamatory complaint, and having already set up Jane Doe to give the false and defamatory interview to NBC News. There we go. Hold on here. I'll put it on mute. Got some sirens going by. It's kind of the fun of living in downtown LA, right? It's exciting. We live kind of near this intersection. Emergency vehicles blow by here like every 2 seconds, I swear to God. But here we go. Buzbee, Fortney, and the Buzbee law firm were happy to perpetuate the lies and hold out hope for an unwarranted payment for them and Doe. Indeed, Buzbee went so far as to tell TMZ on December 10th, 2024, already fully aware of the falsity of the allegations, having met with Doe in Houston, that Doe was, quote, not ruling out filing rape charges against Mr. Carter, and what happens next is up to my client. It's her case, and what she decides to do, you will find out in due course. However, the legal process got in the way of their scheme. Buzbee had signed the complaints in the action against Mr. Carter without being admitted to the bar of the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York as required. When the judge presiding over the case was advised of this fact, she issued an order dated January 28, 2025, requiring Buzbee to file proof of admission to the SDNY on the docket. The very next day, January 29th, Buzbee applied for such admission. Okay. So on February 13th, one day before his deadline to file proof, he got news that he was being denied, because he had already filed pleadings in SDNY without being admitted to the bar of the court. His application for admission has been denied. He was also instructed to attach a copy of the denial order to any subsequent application for admission in a particular case in SDNY. So faced with his inability to comply with the judge's order in the case against Mr. Carter and facing the threat of punishment by the court, Buzbee dispatched Fortney to Alabama to meet with Doe that same day, namely February 13th, 2025. So they're kind of admitting here, interesting, like when you read this, they're basically admitting that the lawsuit wasn't dismissed because Buzbee admitted, like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have filed this. This was false. I mean, this is Jay-Z's own lawyers kind of laying out how it was his inability to get admitted to the Southern District of New York, and him knowing that was going to really piss the judge off, and that the judge probably wasn't going to let him come in pro hoc VJ. That's the reason they dismissed the case. It sounds like. I mean, that's according to Jay-Z's own recounting of what happened here. But it says during that meeting, and this, I'm wondering if this had to have come from Jane Doe, because remember, obviously Jay-Z's people have talked to Jane Doe, but there's very little in this actual complaint about like what exactly did she say. There's some quotes here and there. Like I said, they've got something up in quote in the very beginning that I'm like, if she actually said that, that's a huge like bombshell that Buzbee is the one that brought up Jay-Z. But I'm thinking that this must have come from her too, that this meeting about meeting with Fortney on February 13th, which is the day before the case was dismissed. It says Fortney falsely, maliciously, and manipulatively told Doe that the case against Mr. Carter needed to be dismissed as Mr. Carter had made threats against Doe's life, and it was too dangerous to continue with the case. Of course, no such threats had ever been made. And again, they don't say how they know that or who they're attributing that to, but I'm thinking it had to have come from her, because they've made it clear that they've talked to her. So it says, rather, Buzbee and Fortney were desperate to withdraw the false case or face punishment in court for their actions in filing a false pleading without Buzbee even being admitted to the SDNY, jeopardizing their ability to continue with the more than 20 other cases they had pending in SDNY. And that's currently pending too. He is in trouble in Southern District of New York. And that's why you notice that he recently, I think just last week, filed 4 more lawsuits against Diddy, but he filed them all in state court, in New York State Court, because I think he knows he's in some trouble in the Southern District of New York. But then, so this is the next day, Doe quietly filed her voluntary dismissal with prejudice. That's the rape lawsuit in Southern District of New York. It says, but the threats and extortion did not end with the dismissal of Doe's fraudulent lawsuit. Rather, on Friday, February 28th, 2025, after Doe admitted to all of the foregoing, and after Buzbee became aware of those admissions, a prominent New York attorney serving as Buzbee and Fortney's co-counsel called an attorney for Mr. Carter. During that call, Buzbee and Fortney's New York co-counsel threatened that if Mr. Carter's attorneys filed anything in Mr. Carter's pending extortion and defamation case in California against Buzbee related to the statements made by Doe, fully exculpating Mr. Carter and inculpating her and Buzbee for extortion and conspiracy, that Buzbee would issue a public statement by Doe that she was, 1, being harassed by Mr. Carter's people since she dropped the lawsuit, and 2, that she dropped the lawsuit only because she was afraid for her life, and that the allegations against Carter in the dropped lawsuit were all true, which is basically what we saw today in the declaration that he filed. Let me see here. Of course, Doe's allegations about being harassed by Carter's people since she dropped the lawsuit and about her reasons for dropping the lawsuit are and always were false. When Doe, Buzbee, and Fortney and their New York counsel said them, they knew or could readily have discovered through any reasonable inquiry that these statements were false. Thus, the threats of extortion and further defamation continue to this day, necessitating that Mr. Carter take action to prevent unscrupulous actors from further preying on him. So the first cause of action, malicious prosecution. And this is what I heard so much about when I went to the hearing last week on the extortion claim against him, because the judge was basically saying that the legislature's made clear that as long as a lawyer has an intent to sue and a client lined up, they can basically just make up stuff in a demand letter, and it's not extortion. It's protected by litigation privilege. So Jay-Z had a lawyer in court who was saying that they had investigators who had someone who would say that they heard Buzbee sent Jay-Z these demand letters without the consent of his clients. But he didn't have any more information on that. He couldn't give a name. And I mean, I got the impression that this was all happening in real time. He was sitting in court. This lawyer was emailing other attorneys who were in touch with the investigator who was out in Alabama, talking to Jane Doe at that very minute. I mean, that's what it kind of seemed like. And now that I see this filing, I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what was going on. So the judge was offering to delay the hearing and give them more time to come up with this, but the lawyer said that he wasn't sure that they could get the actual name of the person to go on record. So they just ended up proceeding with that hearing. And the judge made clear that unless he gets some kind of new evidence, that he's going to dismiss the extortion claim because, like I said, apparently you can just lie your ass off in a demand letter. And as long as you have an intent to sue and a client, it's covered by litigation privilege. But the judge did say that the remedy for this and what this really is could be a malicious prosecution case. So that's what we have here is this new is this new complaint that was filed today in federal court in Alabama, which is where the woman lives. And she's being sued for malicious prosecution along with Buzbee and his co-counsel. And then she's also being sued for defamation because Buzbee is still being sued for defamation in LA. And some of those claims are going, there's one defamation claim and they brought 6 statements under it. And the judge is saying that 3 of those statements are going to get thrown out, but 3 are going to move forward. But so they've got malicious prosecution against Fortney, Buzbee, and Jane Doe. And this is for the lawsuit that was filed, like it says. And this just kind of repeats everything we just read. It says Doe's lawsuit lacked any probable cause to believe her lawsuit had legal merit, as demonstrated by how easy it was for NBC to disprove Doe's allegations after a few days of investigation that revealed evidence that directly contradicted her version of events. And they go through all the examples that we went over above. It says, after realizing that their plan would not succeed, here we have here we go. Make sure we're on the right page here, guys. Thanks for tuning in. After finally realizing that their plan would not succeed, defendants quietly moved to voluntarily dismiss the lawsuit with prejudice. Accordingly, the lawsuit was resolved in Mr. Carter's favor without settlement or compromise. Defendants' initiation and continued prosecution of the frivolous lawsuit was willful and malicious and was intended to oppress and cause injury to Mr. Carter. Accordingly, Mr. Carter is entitled to an award of punitive damages. So abuse of process, and they're repeating the same stuff about basically pretty similar to a malicious prosecution claim, but different statute you can bring it under. Bringing a meritless lawsuit. Civil conspiracy covers the same conduct, all them working together. And this is defamation brought against just Doe. Because remember, Buzbee's already being sued for defamation in LA. Because he's done all these interviews. Fortney, I'm sure they would love to sue him for defamation if they could, but I'm not sure Fortney has made enough public statements, if any, for them to bring a case against him. But they're suing her over the NBC News interview. It says Doe's accusations were neither speculative nor innocuous, but asserted by Doe as a matter of fact to lead a reader or viewer to conclude that Mr. Carter committed the criminal act she alleged. It says Doe's false statement and her devised plan to use media networks such as NBC News to disseminate the statements to millions were a part of Doe's calculated plan to falsely accuse Mr. Carter of sexual assault and inflict maximum reputational harm on him to induce payment. Doe's false statements are defamatory per se, as inflammatory statements falsely accusing Mr. Carter of crimes of moral turpitude that subjected Mr. Carter to disgrace, ridicule, public hatred, and contempt. Saying he was directly injured. We've heard this before. He actually filed a declaration in the other case that's signed by Jay-Z, by Shawn Carter, talks about lost contracts, said that Roc Nation lost contracts worth like $20 million after this all came out. And also brings up the timing of the filing, says that he thinks it was filed intentionally on the eve of the Lion King premiere that Blue Ivy was in, like to just intentionally humiliate him and make him have to choose between, his daughter's movie premiere or trying to quell press attention from this. So yeah, no specific dollar amount, but remember, if you hear about dollar amounts and lawsuits, usually those are kind of just thrown in there for headlines. Like the real damages will come out through, experts and all that stuff later. But again, that was the new federal lawsuit that's filed today in Alabama federal court against the woman who accused Jay-Z of rape, and then also her lawyers. But there's some new stuff going on with, as kind of a response to this, or this was filed in the other case, but the Los Angeles case today, because the judge has not finalized his ruling on the extortion claim. He's, like I said, the judge in LA has said that he's going to dismiss the extortion claim against Buzbee, but he hasn't finalized his ruling. But when I went into the file this afternoon, Buzbee had filed stuff, and one was a declaration from Jane Doe. So I'm like, okay, that's pretty interesting. What does that say? And when you bring it up, it's like, okay, this is such a cluster. Like they're just going to have to put Jane Doe on the stand for something. I mean, you think I don't know. It's interesting. Like, because now Jay-Z's lawyers are going to have to respond to this. So I don't know if they're going to try to get their own declaration from Jane Doe. I don't know if they can, but we're going to hear more about like what evidence do they have about the statements that she gave them? Do they have, like, is this on a video? Do they have a recording of this? Or are they going to bring this forward? Because like I said, they don't really expand on the evidence of their statements in the complaint, but the complaint is written with so much confidence that it's kind of hard to believe that what are they just making this up. So yeah, when I emailed Tony Buzbee, he emailed a statement back saying he stands by the claims, and he was saying that when he read the statements in the lawsuit from Jane Doe, he said it's clear to me that they either made those statements up or they're attributing comments to Jane Doe that aren't actually from Jane Doe. But then this declaration that was filed in the LA case takes it a step further. And this is actually Jane Doe, the Alabama woman. Declaration of Jane Doe, signed by her. This is her lawyer. Her lawyer filing this. She says, on February 21st, 2025, I was approached at my home by two individuals, a woman and a large man. They cornered me on my front porch and told me they are investigators working with an attorney on behalf of Jay-Z. They asked me if I would be willing to sign an affidavit stating that my claims in the New York action were false. I refused. They also asked me if Mr. Buzbee sought me out as a client and whether Mr. Buzbee offered to pay me to pursue a false claim against Jay-Z. I told them that neither of those things ever happened, and that I asked them to leave me alone. I felt intimidated and terrified at being confronted by these two individuals on my doorstep, and that they knew my name and home address despite me being anonymous in the New York action. I also understood that investigators approached my father and my mother multiple times. Two investigators approached my father and mother as my father was picking my mother up from a medical appointment, asking them similar questions about whether Mr. Buzbee had paid me, and requesting that they sign affidavits stating that my claims were false. My father was separately approached later at a gas station, and my mother was separately approached at a store. In all instances, my parents refused to sign any affidavits, denied the investigators' claims about my case and Mr. Buzbee's conduct, and asked to be left alone. And it's important to note that it's totally common and standard that the lawyers are the ones who write the declaration and the affidavit. They might, depending on the case and depending on the relationship, they might sit down and kind of go over the first draft with the client. But I think it's pretty standard that when you see a declaration, it's the person who signed it did sign it and go over it. But the idea that they're the ones who wrote everything in it it's the lawyers who write all that stuff. But it is very alarming to me that Jay-Z's agents are looking for me and now know my whereabouts. Fear of intimidation and retaliation from Jay-Z and or his associates or fans is one of the reasons that I chose not to pursue the New York action and instructed my attorneys to dismiss it. Although I ultimately chose not to pursue them, I stand by my claims in the New York action and believe that I had meritorious claim against Jay-Z. In September of 2000, when I was approximately 13 years old, I attended a party in New York where both Shawn Combs, Diddy, and Jay-Z were present. I saw and recognized both men at the party. At the party, I accepted a drink and began to feel lightheaded. I went into an empty bedroom to lie down by myself. Soon after that, Diddy and Jay-Z and another individual entered the bedroom. Jay-Z removed my clothes, and both Jay-Z and Diddy engaged in sexual intercourse with me. I did not consent to this, and given that I was only 13 at the time, I could not have given valid consent. In 2024, I signed up as a client with AVA Law Group. AVA Law Group partnered with the Buzbee Law Firm to pursue claims against Diddy and others, and my claims were referred to the Buzbee Law Firm as a result. Several attorneys from the Buzbee Law Firm interviewed me extensively, including Anthony Buzbee. I authorized Mr. Buzbee and the Buzbee Law Firm to send a demand letter to Jay-Z and to initiate legal proceedings against him in the New York action. I ultimately decided to dismiss the New York action because I was frightened by the reaction of Jay-Z and his supporters and the likelihood that I would have to be publicly named and subjected to public attacks. Jay-Z and his attorneys made numerous public statements attacking the veracity of my statements, and I am informed and believe that he sent investigators looking for me. I understand that even my attorneys have been sued by Jay-Z. I was not prepared to undergo years of attacks, intimidation, and harassment, and ultimately chose to dismiss my claims after certain negotiations among the attorneys involved in the New York action. I declare under penalty of perjury under the laws of the state of California that the foregoing is true and correct. Oh, and that's dated the 27th of February. So that's, I don't know. It's hard to know what to believe. That's dated the 27th of February, but it was just filed today. And this was executed on February 3rd March 3rd, which is today, when they just sent this stuff out. Yeah, it's, I don't know. Because this declaration pretty well mirrors what they kind of previewed in the, what Jay-Z's lawyers previewed in the lawsuit. Like, they're basically saying that this is what Buzbee was threatening to go public with. If they went public with these statements that they supposedly have from Jane Doe saying that he's the one who brought up Jay-Z and that she wasn't attacked by him, she knows it's not true. They're saying that Buzbee had threatened to go forward with saying that Jane Doe's being harassed and that she stands by her statements, that the only reason she dismissed the lawsuit is because she was being harassed. And that seems to be, that seems to be what he just did here. After they filed that lawsuit and that went everywhere this afternoon, that's when Tony Buzbee turned around and filed this declaration from her in California state court. So, gosh, what a bunch of drama. Like I said, it begs the question of what do Jay-Z's lawyers have regarding their statements from Jane Doe, because the lawsuit that we just went over, it talks about her statements, but it's not like they attached like recordings or anything like that, or a transcript of her statements or anything like that. But it seems like the way they wrote it, I doubt they're just making it all up. So we'll see as the drama turns. But I was like, wow, this is a lot of drama. But if you guys go to legalaffairsandtrials.com, I've got a story up. I'm going to do another story on all this stuff that'll include all the documents. But this is on the hearing that I went to last week and explains the LA case where, like I said, the judge is saying he's going to dismiss the extortion claim against Tony Buzbee. But 3 of the 6 statements brought under the defamation claim are going to survive. And I get into the details on what exactly those statements are. 2 of them are really hinge on a like too. The judge actually took into consideration the fact that Tony Buzbee liked a tweet that indicates John Doe in this lawsuit is Jay-Z. And the judge was saying that makes it more likely, or that makes it see if I can bring that. Yeah, here we go. That makes it possible for people to connect that these statements right here that don't name Jay-Z, but allude to them. It may not be big names at first, but we have a long list of names. The judge made the connection between that statement and then Buzbee liking a tweet that said, "Oh, one of the anonymous people is Jay-Z." The judge was saying that bolsters these tweets, the defamatory power of these tweets. So somebody asked Leon, does she still have anonymity? Yeah, she had been anonymous. And there was no indication that she was going to be publicly exposed. I mean, later, like definitely if it went to trial, but she had been granted anonymity, and it was still proceeding. So yeah, time bomb. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it really just kind of depends. It's like who's more. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like Tony Buzbee is just on his face kind of reckless, like what he was doing with the Southern District of New York stuff and all that stuff. I think people's eyes kind of glaze over when we talk about, you know, him being admitted to the Southern District of New York, and he's admitted in New York state courts, but he can't practice in federal courts. It's just kind of like, what? And most of that stuff is totally routine, like him being a licensed lawyer in Texas, and he's also technically licensed in New York state court. If he had just applied for admission to the Southern District of New York, I think it's pretty standard that he would have been admitted. So the fact that he didn't, and he filed all these lawsuits and just didn't apply for admission when, like I said, it's pretty given that he would have gotten it. It kind of just begs the question of why. Why would he do that? And I think the Southern District of New York judges are like kind of onto his ass the way they rejected his admission now. So I mean, it's just, I mean, I don't want to like assign motive to what he's doing, but it does raise the question of why would he do that? Why wouldn't he get admission in the Southern District of New York when doing so is pretty easy? And the fact that he didn't do so kind of screwed him up. Like if he can't get admitted on Pro Hoc VJ on these lawsuits that he's filed, which is again a totally standard thing, like anyone who has an out-of-state attorney, their out-of-state attorney is getting a Pro Hoc VJ application. It's a one-time thing, and you have a local sponsor. But it's better if you're going to file like 25 lawsuits in one district, like Tony Buzbee's doing. It's better just get admitted to the district. But the fact that the judges are onto him and won't admit him to the district is going to hurt him from getting admitted Pro Hoc VJ. So it is very possible that he just screwed up all those federal lawsuits against Diddy by not doing this. So it's weird. Like I said, it really does beg the question of why he's doing this. And when you read through Jay-Z's filings, his lawyers are saying, well, he did this because he knows all the lawsuits are haphazard and that they could get thrown out and subject him to sanctions. And by not admitting himself and not being admitted to the bar, he shelters himself from that. And like I said, I don't really want to assign motives to the whole thing because you're kind of, but it does. It just begs the question of why wouldn't he get admitted to that? And it does seem like it's likely that, yeah, he's trying to avoid being held accountable for any of these lawsuits that he's filing in there. It's kind of interesting. So it's kind of like, who do you think has the upper hand, and who do you think is behaving more unscrupulously, and like who's least trustworthy in the whole thing? But it's just going to come down to, like, is Jane Doe just going to have to like reveal herself in court? Is she going to, talk to, I don't know. I think a lot remains to be seen here. But again, if you guys go to legalaffairsandtrials.com, I go over, in my latest story, I go over the surviving statements and the defamation claim. This is the existing lawsuit in state court that was filed against Buzbee. And then the statements that Epstein plans to dismiss, and go over the details on there here. But I've got the ruling linked in here. But if you guys sign up for the mailing list, I'm going to send something out today that goes over the new lawsuit and has all the documents linked in there, so you can check it out. But again, we've got the new federal lawsuit. It's kind of the big one. This is the complaint right here, 25 pages, and Southern District of Alabama filed against Jane Doe and Tony Buzbee. But then kind of the plot twist this afternoon was Tony Buzbee filing the declaration from Jane Doe in the Los Angeles case, where she says, you know what, I stand by the claims, and I'm intimidated by Jay-Z and his lawyers. It's like, oh wow, this is quite a plot twist. But anyway, Leon, I see your question here. Do you think he may have been trying to put together a tort type sexual assault lawsuit by having named Diddy and Jay-Z? Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, they definitely were. That was the case. That was the case that got dismissed. It was the sexual assault lawsuit against Jay-Z and Diddy, but that just is dismissed and not coming back. So, yeah. So I think this is just now heating up. We haven't heard the last of this, but if you guys go to my website, legalaffairsandtrials.com, sign up for my mailing list. I'll have everything. I'll be updating everything here soon. But yeah, get back on the mailing list. Hit the like button. Thanks everybody. I'll see you on the next one. And yeah, again, legalaffairsandtrials.com to sign up for the mailing list. Appreciate you.